So there was an 8-year-old boy who was preparing for his first Holy Communion. And it had been a difficult time in the country, so this was something his family was looking forward to. It was something to celebrate, no? But a month before his first Holy Communion, his mother died. 3 years later, his brother had just become a doctor, and a scarlet fever epidemic broke out. But his brother wanted to serve his patients, but ultimately he got sick and he died. Then, when this man was 19 years old, he came home to find his father dead. He said that before the age of 20, I had already lost all the people that I loved. The man that I'm talking about is Karol Wojtyła, who became Saint Pope John Paul II, one of the greatest saints, who is also known as the Titan that bent history for the massive influence that he had. Towards the end of his life, when he was suffering from Parkinson's disease, which was deteriorating his body, he lost his mobility, he was losing the ability to speak, he was suffering from severe arthritis. But he looked at those people that were with him, accompanying him, and he said, "Do not be sad. Be happy. I'm happy." How can that be? How can somebody whose life was so full of suffering be happy? How could it be that he overcame all of that suffering and is one of the greatest examples of a life of service and love to others? We've all experienced suffering, no? And I'm sure there's many of you here that are maybe going through a great difficulty right now. Suffering leads us to ask the question, as St. Pope John Paul II himself asked, what is the meaning of suffering? What is the meaning of suffering? Why does God allow suffering? So I want to share a few words of St. John Paul II's own answer to that question. St. Pope John Paul II was convinced that suffering is a mystery that only receives meaning in the light of Christ's suffering. It is a mystery that only receives meaning in the light of Christ's suffering. So it's a mystery that only makes sense when we look at the suffering of Christ on the cross. He said that on the cross, the evil of suffering is overcome and transformed. The cross is the answer. See, on the cross, God took the greatest evil that was ever committed, that of man killing the Son of God, creatures crucifying the Creator, and he brought the greatest good out of it. That is our salvation. So if God can bring good out of the greatest evil and suffering that ever happened, then he can bring good out of your suffering. John Paul II said the cross overcomes and transforms suffering. We see this in the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. So if you remember, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, who first were thinking to kill him, but instead they sold him into slavery and told his father that he was dead. Then after a series of events, Joseph becomes Pharaoh's right-hand man, and in the time of a famine, he was responsible for distributing food. So his brothers came to him begging and fearful, and these were his words to them: "Do not fear. Even though you meant harm to me, God meant it for good. Even though you meant harm to me, God meant it for good." God can bring good out of any suffering. For most of us, we live in cultures that are without God, and therefore they're cultures that don't understand the meaning of suffering. They've emptied suffering of its meaning and tried to silence any explanation of suffering. But there is meaning to suffering. There is value in suffering. God permits it only for a greater good. And John Paul II said that when we unite our sufferings to Christ, it ends in joy. In the book of Revelation, we read that God the Father says, "Behold, I make all things new." Think about those words. Behold, I make all things new. All things. Not just good things or the best things or okay things, but all things, even bad things, even the worst things. And I make them new. Not I make them okay, I make them bearable, I make it so that you can get through it, but I make them new. And the English word for new doesn't fully capture what the scriptures is saying. So the Greek word for new, there was a different word for new in the sense of age, but this word was meant to express freshness, something that was better than what came before it. God brings good out of the worst things. He takes the worst things of the world and transforms them. Finally, one of the greatest secrets to the greatness of St. Pope John Paul II is that when he was a child, after he lost his mother, his father brought him before an image of Our Lady, and he said, "This will be your mother now." Mary is truly our mother, and like a good mother, she's never so close to us as when we are suffering. So let us turn to Our Lady with the confidence of a child and ask her for the grace of faith, for the grace to carry our cross as well and unite them to Christ, her Son.